I don't think that it's really, I don't think one should really describe the OSCE as a piece of architecture. Maybe it's an architectural plan, because it's an organization, the weakest organization in Europe. It's an organization which is based on principles which have been systematically violated from the moment the Helsinki Final Act was signed. Not all of them. The Russian Federation completed the job of violating the last of the principles recently. But it's a weak bit of architecture, which the Russians quite like because they feel they can manipulate it, and which the Americans have never taken seriously. What you can say about it is that it is a place where, if this problem is going to be solved, maybe it can be solved. The Ukrainian mission here, which doesn't get as good a press as it deserves, is actually, I've seen a lot of civilian missions in different places, and I think that this is one of the best that I've ever seen. And I think that they're doing a fantastic job, and down in some areas, in practice, they're risking their lives. But they're severely handicapped by the amount of access they're given. They're continually being stopped by people at roadblocks, by people who make agreements, which they then break, and so on. And they have got no power. The power behind the OSCE mission is in other capitals. It's in Kyiv. It's in Moscow. It's in Washington, maybe a bit. But the mission itself can't solve the problem. The problem may be solved within this framework, and if somebody wants to solve it, then the mission will be extremely useful. And it can be useful on a small scale, perhaps by helping prevent accidents. And so I think it's doing a really important job, perhaps in preventing things from getting worse. And there's more that can be done now, I hope, in delivering humanitarian aid and things like that. Coming back to what Alexander said about the Charter of Paris and the concept of security being indivisible. I, to be honest, have always had difficulty with this concept. I'm afraid that security is highly divisible. Whether you're a member of NATO or not a member of NATO makes a very big difference to your security. Security is not indivisible. And so whatever bit of an alliance structure you change in Europe, it changes somebody's security. The country that joins feels safer. Other countries may not feel safer. Actually, I think it's legitimate for Russia to be concerned about NATO moving right up to its border. Russia has lots of illegitimate concerns, but that strikes me as being not an unreasonable security concern. I think that the Russians misunderstand and misjudge NATO, but for a long time they've seen NATO as an aggressive, hostile organization. And so the fact that they're concerned about it is something that reasonable people would take into account. I like the way in which Alexander presented the question. There are these two options, and they do in some way resemble the options that Germany was facing in the late 1940s. I would also, if you go back a little bit further, 200 years, you find that there were similar questions being considered at the Congress of Vienna, and it was from that time onwards that Swiss neutrality, and Switzerland was then in the middle, essentially between France and Austria, and later between France and Germany as well. Swiss and Austria too. Swiss neutrality actually served Switzerland well, but it was good because it was a clear, unambiguous status that was accepted by everybody. And I think the important thing, if one wants to make security indivisible, is the idea that things should be unambiguous and should be accepted by everybody in some sense. As for the right of every country to be a member of any alliance, that's a part of the Helsinki Final Act. On the other hand, those who wish to join NATO should be pretty sure that NATO wants them. because you have to ask yourself, will everybody in, and you can add the name of your country yourself, will everybody in X be ready to die for Donetsk?
Well, we will come on to issues of signing up to NATO in our next part of our discussion as well. Robert, just a closing thought.
Can I just make one further thought? I worry about Crimea because I worry about a kind of creeping normalization, a kind of a creeping assumption that Crimea is a problem that's settled. I would like to see somebody, everybody actually, take the question of Crimea to the International Court of Justice. There's a procedure for doing this under UN Article number 93. People say, oh, it won't work because the head of the court is a Slovak. This is nonsense. There has never been a clearer case of illegality that you could imagine. And somewhere...
But that is just a procedure, though, isn't it, Robert? That's not going to solve anything.
No, but it's a way of fighting the Russians on territory where we can win. Sanctions, strengthening Ukraine, using the law. These are all things where we are potential winners. Military, much more difficult. So we need to find ground where we'll win, and this is a piece of ground where we'll win. The course goes on for a long time. Actually, anybody who wants to quote the Russian speeches that they made when they were attacking the independence of Kosovo, they'll find that they work very well for Crimea.
Okay, thank you.